Sometime last year, a massive storm descended on my city, forcing everyone into lockdown. For nearly 24 hours, torrential rain flooded houses and roads. News reports showed windows shattered by wind and roof panels torn from homes like paper. I was alone, the isolation amplified by the raging elements. I spent the day glued to my phone, compulsively tracking the news, the battery percentage ticking down ominously, while listening to the chaotic symphony raging outside. Around 5 or 6 p.m., the power began flickering. Brief plunges into darkness, then a sputtering return to light. An hour later, it surrendered completely, plunging the house into a deep gloom. I waited, holding my breath, expecting its return, but the silence from appliances and the persistent darkness soon told me it likely wouldn't be restored until the storm broke. My phone was already dipping below 30%, and I cursed myself for not having a power bank or even a simple flashlight handy. Resigned, I sat on the couch, the only light a weak gray filter from the window, scrolling numbly through news updates, each refresh potentially the last before the battery died. Suddenly, a heavy booming knock hammered on the front door. The sound wasn't just loud, it felt concussive against the storm's roar, startling me so badly I nearly dropped my phone. Who in God's name would be out in this? My heart pounded. I hesitated, frozen between fear and a reluctant sense of obligation. Perhaps a neighbor needed help, stranded, injured, or maybe they were just checking if my power was out too, seeking some small solidarity in the blackout. It seemed utterly absurd to brave this weather, but the thought of someone needing help gnawed at me. I crept to the door, footsteps silenced by the carpet, and pressed my eye to the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty, slick with rain sheeting down. Maybe I'd waited too long, my hesitation costing me the chance to see who it was. A deeply unnerving feeling washed over me, a prickling sensation on my skin, the feeling of being watched despite the empty view. I retreated from the door, backing into the relative dark of the living room. Seeking even a sliver more light, I cracked open a nearby window, the damp, wind-whipped air instantly chilling the room. Just sitting there, staring into the gloom, listening to the house creak and groan under the storm's assault, felt like my only option. Then, faintly, carried on a gust of wind, I heard a voice, or thought I did. A brief murmur, indistinct. I whipped my head around, straining to pinpoint the source, but heard only the howling wind and the drumming rain. It must have been the storm playing tricks, I told myself, my rational mind battling rising panic. Just the wind sounding like words. I turned back to the window, trying to calm my racing pulse. Almost immediately, I heard it again, clearer this time. Distinct words, low and urgent, like a brief hushed exchange between two people right outside. I scrambled, heart hammering, to another window on the side of the house, scanning the oppressive darkness. The rain was a thick gray curtain, visibility near zero. Then a sudden, violent flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the entire yard in stark, blinding white for a split second. In that instantaneous snapshot, etched against the downpour, I saw a figure, just standing there, maybe 20 feet from my house. A dark silhouette, featureless, motionless. Before I could process anything, size, gender, intent, the world plunged back into profound darkness, the afterimage burning on my retinas. What were they doing out there? Just standing in the middle of a hurricane? Growing truly unnerved now, fear coiling tight in my stomach, I slammed the window shut and locked it, then hurried around, checking the others. Feeling exposed downstairs, I decided to retreat upstairs to the relative security of the bedroom. Still, the heavy knocking, the disembodied voices, and the chilling image of the figure haunted my thoughts. Who was out there in such a brutal storm, and who were they talking to? Was the figure I saw the one who knocked? Or were there two? Hours crawled by upstairs in the dark bedroom. Each minute felt like an eternity, filled only by the relentless, deafening sound of the storm battering the roof and windows. My phone finally died, plunging me into near-total darkness and severing my last link to the outside world. I sat rigid on the bed, straining my ears, imagining sounds over the tempest. Just as the adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by a weary dread, just as I started to convince myself the earlier events were figments of a stressed imagination, a faint but distinct sound echoed from downstairs, the unmistakable click and creak of a door opening. My blood ran cold. I stopped breathing, listening with an intensity that hurt my ears. But the storm seemed to swell, a deafening roar that drowned out any possibility of hearing footsteps on the stairs or floorboards creaking below. Trapped in the near-dark bedroom, completely isolated and paralyzed by fear, all I could do was wait, hidden, my mind conjuring terrifying scenarios of who was now inside my house. Was it the figure? Were they inside? Minute after agonizing minute passed in suffocating silence, broken only by the external chaos. Finally, summoning every shred of courage, I fumbled in the dark for where I'd left my dead phone, then remembered its uselessness. Panic flared again. Landline. Did I even have one anymore? Number. My only option was to wait, hoping they wouldn't come upstairs, hoping they'd just leave. The wait was torture. Eventually, sheer terror spurred me into action. I had to do something. Recalling my neighbor had a generator and might still have phone service, I considered making a desperate run for it. But the thought of opening the door and potentially confronting whoever was downstairs was paralyzing. The idea of calling 911 felt futile without a phone, but then I remembered an old, rarely used tablet I kept in the nightstand drawer. Its battery was usually low, but maybe. Fumbling, I found it, pressed the power button, and felt a surge of desperate hope as the screen flickered to life. 15% battery. My fingers shaking, I connected to the Wi-Fi, miraculously still working from a nearby source or my own router's backup battery, and used its calling feature, whispering frantically to the 911 operator, explaining the storm, the power outage, the sounds, the opened door, felt surreal. They assured me officers were being dispatched, but warned conditions were treacherous and response time would be significantly delayed. Over 30 agonizing minutes elapsed between hearing that door open downstairs and the distant but approaching wail of sirens cutting through the storm's noise. In all that time, there were no further sounds from within the house, no footsteps on the stairs, no doors opening or closing, no one approaching my room. The silence from downstairs was almost as terrifying as the initial sound. When the police finally arrived, their flashing lights painting the bedroom walls in frantic strokes of red and blue, I crept downstairs, heart pounding. The officers, clad in heavy rain gear, were cautious. They found only the front door standing wide open, rain blowing inside, and muddy, wet footprints tracked onto the entryway floor and a few steps into the living room. There was no sign of forced entry beyond the open door, no drawers pulled, nothing obviously disturbed, no indication of any specific intent. It was as if someone had simply let themselves in, perhaps using the storm cover, took a brief look around the dark downstairs, and then just left. Why? The officers searched the house and yard thoroughly, but found nothing else. To this day, the events of that night remain a deeply unsettling, unanswered question mark in my memory. About 5 years ago, my parents bought a new house an hour outside the city, where I was crammed into a small one-bedroom apartment. This place was the opposite. A beautiful, almost absurdly sprawling countryside home on a vast plot of land. Frankly, it seemed way too big for just the two of them, but they'd fallen in love with the space and the quiet. The logistics were complicated. Due to their work schedules, the movers were set to deliver all their belongings a full week before my parents could actually move in. To bridge the gap and ensure the delivery went smoothly, I volunteered to house sit. I arrived on a bright Saturday morning, greeted the weary-looking movers, and spent the day directing traffic as they hauled box after box, piece after piece of furniture inside. By sundown, they were finally finished, leaving me alone in the echoing space. Boxes and bubble-wrapped furniture were piled haphazardly in the corners of vast empty rooms. The only concession to comfort was the living room couch they'd unwrapped and set up for me. Seeing the house filled with stuff, yet utterly devoid of life or personality, underscored its immense size and my own isolation within it. To my apartment dweller eyes, it felt like a cavernous mansion. Huge, wide-open rooms flowed into long, empty hallways that seemed to stretch into shadows. Unpacked, unfamiliar, and silent except for the house's own quiet size, it felt deeply, fundamentally unsettling. After picking at some cold leftovers I'd brought, I felt restless and decided to check out the backyard. A large flagstone patio featured a built-in stone fire pit, looking stark and unused. Various pieces of faded outdoor furniture were scattered forlornly near the side of the house, remnants from the previous owners. I found a reasonably intact lawn chair, dragged it over to the fire pit, sat back and tried to soak in the advertised peace. The night air was cool and breezy, carrying the scent of grass and damp earth. Out here, away from city noise, the quiet was profound. It should have been peaceful. I stayed out there for at least an hour, maybe longer, just watching the stars appear. It must have been around 11 p.m. when, seemingly materializing from the darkness at the edge of the property, a man appeared. He was walking steadily across the far edge of the field that bordered the backyard. My eyes snapped towards where he'd come from, nothing but dark, open land stretching towards a line of distant trees. I looked towards where he seemed to be heading, the same empty expanse. Fog was beginning to gather, drifting in wisps across the ground, adding a layer of surreality. What was he doing way out here, cutting across private property this late? I watched, mystified and vaguely uneasy, as he walked with purpose until the thickening mist swallowed him entirely. Several minutes passed. I kept staring into the swirling fog where he'd vanished, my mind racing with explanations. A neighbor taking a shortcut. Someone lost. It felt wrong. Then, just as suddenly, he emerged again, walking back the way he had come. Only this time he was closer. Not dramatically so, but noticeably closer, his path angling slightly nearer to the house. Close enough now that the unease solidified into genuine discomfort. I felt exposed, sitting there by the unlit fire pit. Not wanting to be seen, suddenly feeling foolishly vulnerable, I scrambled up and quickly retreated inside, locking the patio door behind me. I spent the next hour trying to distract myself, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, but my eyes kept darting to the windows. I checked them a couple of times, peering out into the foggy darkness, but saw nothing concerning, heard nothing unusual. Around 12:30 a.m., exhaustion finally winning out over anxiety, I grabbed a dusty blanket from one of the boxes, tossed it onto the couch situated vulnerably in the middle of the cavernous living room, and eventually drifted off to sleep. I woke abruptly, jolted from sleep by a primal sense of wrongness. Instantly confused and deeply uneasy, my heart hammered against my ribs. What was that? Why did I wake up? The house was pitch black, the silence absolute and somehow heavier than before. The stacked boxes surrounding the couch cast long, distorted, monstrous shadows in the faint, ambient light filtering from somewhere outside. As my eyes struggled to adjust, a bright, focused glare suddenly slashed through the darkness, hitting the far wall. It came from outside the front window. I squinted, momentarily blinded, as the beam of a powerful flashlight swept deliberately across the room, over boxes, furniture, slowly, methodically scanning. Then it abruptly shifted away, leaving phantom spots dancing in my vision. Opening my eyes fully, heart pounding like a drum, I saw the smaller, diffused glow of the light moving just outside the front window. Then it swung back sharply, the beam intensifying as it blasted directly through the glass, illuminating the entire living room like a stage light and hitting me square in the face. I froze, pinned like an insect, every nerve screaming. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, just lay there exposed on the couch. By the time my vision cleared and the initial shock subsided enough for me to duck or react, the light was gone. The window showed only the impenetrable, dark, foggy night beyond. Silence returned, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I slid off the couch, grabbing my phone from the floor. I crept low towards the window, pressing myself against the wall beside it, trying to peer out without being seen. Nothing. Whoever held the flashlight was gone, vanished back into the mist as silently and suddenly as they'd appeared. Had they seen me? Did they know someone was inside? I stood there for long minutes, listening, every creak of the unfamiliar house sounding like an approaching footstep. I don't know who it was or what they wanted. My best guess remains that they saw the moving truck earlier, assumed the house was either empty or full of easily accessible goods, and were casing it for a robbery. Perhaps the light waking me, or the possibility of me being seen, scared them off. Whatever their true intention, I felt a surge of cold certainty that I had been incredibly lucky. If that flashlight beam hadn't startled me awake, I might have woken up to find them inside, discovering their purpose in the worst way imaginable. The rest of that week felt tainted by the incident. Every shadow seemed deeper, every night sound more menacing, and I found myself constantly checking the windows and doors, unable to shake the feeling of having been watched.